Uh, Welcome to the fifth iconography conference, and I'm happy to present you the participants. George Cordes, iconographer, former professor of iconography theory and practice, Athens University, PhD in theology and aesthetics. Todor Mitrovic, iconographer, professor of icon painting at the Academy of Serbian Orthodox Church for Fine Arts and Conservation in Belgrade, PhD in Fine Arts. Reverend Igumen Siloan Justiniano, iconographer, Deputy Abbot, Monastery of St. Dionysius, the Areopagite, New York, editor of Orthodox Arts Journal, MFA, Hunter College. Koman Mihai, iconographer, lecturer of iconography, Faculty of Orthodox Theology, Bucharest, PhD in Byzantine iconography. Philip Davidov, iconographer, iconography instructor, MA in art theory and history, St. Petersburg, Russia. So last time we finished our discussion talking about possible topics for today, and it was about ecclesiology and the imagery. Yes, who would like to start and to shape the discussion?
Well, since we have a priest, maybe maybe it would be the best way to start now.
That's a good strategy. That's too easy of a strategy. No. I think we wanted to discuss some aspects of color. I think that was part of what we wanted to focus on as something more concrete. I think the last part of the conversation had to do with the specific, for lack of a better way of putting it, like emotive content that color brings into the image, and what tends to be in a way over theorized in terms of symbolic meaning as compared to how color has a pictorial overall effect. So that tends, the overall pictorial effect tends to be sort of like marginalized for like conceptual like meanings. And so we thought that we could then focus on some icons to see perhaps if we could unpack how the use of color has an effect on the overall effect of the image. And so, do you want me to start with one icon? Should we start with one icon?
Let's.
Well, I would suggest before start observing or analyzing icons. I would suggest to, let's say, to talk a bit about methodology, because we can just look at different icons, but doesn't mean anything. I don't know if we could conclude anything if we don't have any method. What do you think? What kind of icons we're going to see? What are these samples? Are good samples or not?
My part of the methodology that I had, I guess, in the back of my mind was to pick from the older icons. I mean, I selected from both the Russian school and the Greek school. I selected from the 15th, 19th, and 16th century, I think. And I focused mainly on the clear difference in the handling of color. If there is a methodology, I guess that's the methodology that I used. But in terms of, I don't know what else, in terms of methodology you mean, but
I suppose that it would be good to go back at least, let's say, to 10th century. Since then, after iconoclasm, I suppose we can say, we can support the idea that we have, let's say, a very clear view of what the icon is, what the art of the icon, must be. And so I would say indirectly, a kind of experimental theory about, the function of icons, introduced. And that because after that, we had in church complete iconographic program based more theological, based on more theological background base. And I think that it will be good to start from, let's say, 10th, 11th, to include communion tradition, school, and after that. So if we had samples from this period, let's say from 11th century to 16th, 18th century, we would say that if in all samples we have something stable, then we can conclude that this is the iconographic tradition. Otherwise, if we observe something in 15th century and never again, that's nothing. That's something that randomly came, but it was not established. It was not part of the body of the church iconographic tradition. So that's why I believe that we have to start from 11th century and come to, let's say, 18th, 17th, 18th century. That's the
Okay,
idea.
George, you're starting with this, so you may have something. So maybe you have some images to begin with.
I have images, but so what would be the point? What we're looking for?
Each of us would be having own points to defend or to argue. So, like,
Well,
one point would be that.
Yeah, what we're looking for? That's a question. Okay, we can. All right. Let's see the icons. I can show you something easily. Let's say I'll show you now this. All right. This is 11th century. Mr. Mosios Lucas is 11th century, mid 11th century. All right. It's pre-communion actually period. It's very early. All right, but what we're looking for what we said last time. Let's say the expression of ecclesiology in the icon. What we're looking for. So what would be about colors? Father said before about the colors. Can you tell us exactly, Father, what's the question about the colors?
Well, that's I forgot the specific way that it was framed in the last conversation.
Okay.
But one of the things that came up towards the end was basically the possibility of looking at the color as a way of a springboard to start the discussion about like more specific aspects of the pictorial arrangement of the icons.
Okay.
In terms of methodology, you're right. I don't know what, because you're absolutely right. I think that ultimately I would venture to say that there isn't any specific, there isn't any formula about color in icons. The color arrangement comes from the need to arrive at a unity, a pictorial unity, and to arrange the forms in a way that actually are accessible to the viewer in a functionally effective way. but then there are dimensions of the color that are intuitively carried out by the painter in his own, because of his own personality, and because of perhaps the specific taste of the cultural setting, and all various different reasons. But I think there are the overall effect of the color. It's an important thing to hone in on in order to see how the icon does have an emotional content that goes beyond the specific theological significance of it. And so there are,
Yeah.
there are those dimensions that I think are sort of like in a way undermined, because most of the texts that we encounter discussing iconography mainly focus on their theological meaning, and also they start along the lines of a rhetoric of like praying with icons and things like that, and they're not, the texts most of the time they're not really looking at the icon, they're not looking at what's happening pictorially. There are assumptions that are being taken about what the icon is supposed to be doing, but the icon is not being discussed. And so anyway, so that's, I guess, what was part of what we were discussing last time that brought up the whole issue of color.
Yeah.
But I think go ahead.
Yeah, I would say that in this icon, very early, it's 11th century, we can see a very well structured icon. The color is very well structured, and basically, I think that this is happening in every icon, in every period. So we have a juxtaposition of warm and cold colors and light and dark colors. That's the idea. That's a basic idea. And I made an observation earlier when I was looking earlier images, from let's say for example from Ravenna, and I realized that we don't have in these mosaics, we don't have this we don't have this theory over there. Things are very foggy. It's not so clear, which is 6th century, very official monuments, but still the painters, mosaicists anyway, they didn't have such a clear view as we have here. Here, the color is the substance of the icon. We build the forms through juxtaposition of colors, which is very, very strong. You see, look at this. Let me show you. All right. Look, you see, we have a red and a green.
A green, yes.
Immediately, we have warm and cold. Yeah. And first is red, and then is the cold, because that's the basic in Byzantine Russian iconographic tradition. We start from warm and we're coming to cold. That's the basic. So we see that we have warm, cold, and everywhere we can see the same arrangement. We see light and dark, light, dark, dark, light, and this is blue, this is red. You see, everywhere it's the same idea. Yeah. Even here, the angel is white, greenish, and this is red. Everywhere we have the same idea. So we build through this concept. And this is, for my opinion, this is ecclesiology, because in every icon, everything has its own hypostasis. Nothing is confused with something else. Everything is very well defined and has its own color. We start from very clear, I would say, hypostasis, which is the color. it's very theological, I think, but not in the meaning that we describe a theological meaning, but we express the idea of the way that the church exists as a body of, persons united in Christ. Yeah.
I think in this moment it should be added one detail which can also connect all those ideas and which comes actually from theology. As I remember, the defenders of icons have been insisting very much on the subject of color. The color was not about the aesthetics of color, of course. They have not been dealing with these problems, but actually they insisted on color as something that brings image to life, and they actually used the opposition between color and the shadows. Drawing was just a shadow. Even they used even in a metaphorical way, to describe drawing as an Old Testament and bringing color to icon as coming to the New Testament. Actually, because this was simply the way image was built, they realized that colors bring life to image. They enliven image as a whole, and figures as you said, as a they give a hypothesis. The color gives hypothesis to the figures, to the entities on the image, and especially when it comes to portraits, to figures of people, to images of saints. Colors somehow enliven. It's like something like giving the blood to the body, or giving, let's say, giving the body to the soul. Putting the colors on image simply gave a new life to image, and they recognize this as a very important theological point, I think, because images were the witnesses of incarnation. This is the basics of theology of icon. So this is why color became some kind of distinctive point. Actually, I read some iconoclastic texts, and they use the word color in a very negative sense. In iconoclastic texts, the color itself gets some very negative meanings, because color was a symbol of matter. Color was the earth. It was coming from.
No. In their mind, iconoclastic mind, colors were very, I would say, very materialistic, and could not, I would say, it was not appropriate to render, the spiritual state of saints, etc. But that's another issue.
Yeah, for them. But anyway, this is some kind of, let's say, entering the world of colors from theological perspective. I'm not speaking about what you said, but this should be added at this moment, because when we come to the next centuries, this issue will be solved already. So this is something for the very beginnings of post-iconoclastic art, I think, should be taken into account as well. So sorry, I interrupted you a bit, but I think it's important to know this. So
I think there is another a couple of dimensions that I think are you cannot separate from the color. One of them is the handling of the color itself as a material substance. For example, we're looking at a fresco. So the way that the color is handled in a fresco with the limitations of the lime plaster and all the different levels of what it entails to actually realize the image on the wall will have a different color effect than an egg tempera on a panel, and how the color is handled on that surface. And it also depends on like the level of transparencies and whether it's more painterly than flat and so on and so forth. And those qualities also bring a nuances to the image. Along with that, you could also add the treatment of the volume of the forms, because for example in this image you have like a very sparing suggestion of volume on the mountains on the background, by the very abstract highlightings of white on the top, and very, very minimal linear rhythms. And I think the same idea ties together the image at large, keeping their overall arrangement to a very minimal state of like linear patterning, and broad areas of form, arranged in a rhythmic order throughout the whole space. So there is that use of color in conjunction with line and form and the materiality of it. And I think that it, has to be looked at independently from icon to icon, because every icon will arrange those components in unique and very unique ways. And so that's, I think, another complexity added to just color as purely abstract.
Right, but at the same time, I think that there is something in common in every school and in all this, the body of ecclesiastical art.
Yeah, I agree. I agree, George.
Which is very, very important. The most important thing to see if there is something in common. If we have something, let's say, a basic principle that goes through and connects everything. That's crucial. That's very important.
I think the point of the use of the tension of complementaries of warm and cool, and also complementary hues. You often see.
It's not complementary. That's a Western idea of complementary. We don't have this theory here. It's just a opposition of warm and cold. It's a contrapound.
Well, that's what I mean by complementary.
No, it's not complementary. Complementary, it's a different term. Goes to this impression.
Okay, so we have to
theory.
We have to define terms then. What do we mean by? What do you think I mean by complementary?
Complementary thing, it means that something makes something else to be completed, but it's not here.
That's not what I mean. What I mean by complementary is that there are, for example, like you're saying, two distinct components, one cool, one warm, and they come together to enhance each other in their cooperation. That's what I mean by complementary.
I don't think that they cooperate. They are just distinct.
Well, they have to cooperate if they're arranged in a pictorial field.
They are going to
be set up tensions.
Look, they're going to be united after that. At the first level, they're opposite, warm, cold, and then they're going to be united in light. That's important. Because theologically, if they are completed over here, they don't need the light to be united. So they don't need Christ to be united. When we enter the church, we are different. We're not complete each other. No, in church, in the body of Christ, when we are united, we are complete. It's theological. You see what I mean? Maybe I'm not, describing
No, I
this,
mean,
but
I think we're not disagreeing. I agree 100% with what you're saying. But what I'm not thinking of it when I'm making that statement in terms of the way that you're interpreting it theologically. What I mean is basically the way that the color relationships are resolved and they come together in spite of what might appear to be a distinction or a tension. So, because for example, what I mean is in a pictorial arrangement, for the arrangement to have life in it, inevitably you're going to have to unite and harmonize opposite elements that are in tension with each other. And the image will be resolved insofar as you have brought those elements in a resolution. And so, for example, you have thick lines, you have thin lines, you have warm and cool, you have complementary hues or hues that like in the opposite pole of the color wheel. And all of these tensions are what actually bring about the life in a composition. If you don't have a tension, you don't have life. And so I don't think we're disagreeing. It's just basically different ways of talking about the phenomena itself, either from a theological or just purely abstract, pictorial terms.
yeah, it's okay. Let's not stay on that. Okay.
Right.
Maybe we can see other images and talk more. Let's stop sharing that. So, okay, let's move. Let's see something else. You can suggest anything?
Well, maybe you can share my image, Philip.
Yes, just a
Because it
moment.
starts somewhere in 11th century. I have just proposed it as a kind of. Do we see entire image? Yeah.
Just a moment, should be.
I have just in order to continue the discussion, in order to try to find what George says, what is the something like the essence of ecclesiastical art. I have just tried to put together images from very different historical points, starting at 11th century, exactly in Hosius Lucas as well, but with mosaic. So maybe we can develop further with these images in some way. But I would like also George to conclude his basic idea about colors, because somehow I feel you have not finished the point about colors. What I liked about your concept is that colors do are you for every surface on image, for every entity, let's say, on image. Colors, it has its own specific color. Color makes it makes it specific and gives its hypostasis. So I would like you to make a point on this, because I think it's very, very important. And this is something that truly, in my opinion, survives till the Russia and this last image that we can see.
Well, this is the basic structure in every, I would say, icon in this tradition. Every icon is built through this. I wouldn't say harmony anyway. It's a distinction between colors, warm, cold, light, and dark. That's the principles. So in every icon we see that every specific form has its own color. So this way we have a very clear view of all elements of the icon. Nothing is confused, nothing is blurred and foggy. And all these items are over there. It's a community of different individualities anyway. And that's the first settlement. But after that, it's iconographer's task or goal to unite everything. So, and the second stage is to bring everything towards spectators in our space through light. Light plays this role, unifies everything, and connects the image, all parts of the image, with the spectators. Of course, the line and the rhythm plays the same role. It's not independent. It's not something that is a different thing, because every form, it's linearly, I would say, rendered. And through this, we have rhythm in everything, in every aspect of the icon. So that's the function of color. That's the function of light, and that makes the image be alive, because we have a rhythm over there. It's a vibration of the icon, and this, the whole thing, the entire image is moving out towards spectator through light. And we have this community and this ecclesiology we were describing last time. Yeah, that's the idea.
Very interesting. Thank you, George.
Yeah, this is very important point. I would add also that to this, let's say, differentiation, which starts with color and at the end comes to the unity. Actually, everything gets its importance in the space of image. Nothing is neglected.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing is, let's say, less worthy. This is, I think, also a very important ecclesiastical point that could be transferred from, let's say, ecclesiastical life to the visual field. So there are not much details on icons, but everything that exists is, every detail is very, let's say, very important. I would use here one nice literary image that I read from our famous theologian of 20th century, Bishop Nikolai Velimirovich. Somewhere he said, there is nothing that is less important in church. In church, there are only important things, more important things, and the most important things. This is very, very nice image, literary image that could be used in here, I think.
That's beautiful. Very nice.
Yes. So this is, I just wanted to add to your point, which is really, really, really important here, I think. Okay, Philip, Mihai.
Well, Mihai is present audio, but I hope Mihai is here. Mihai, you hear us?
The connection is not good.
Yeah. Well, I think I can try to start from somewhere on the outer world. For someone who never been in church, looking at an image like that, this person would say it's very strange. And it's strange not because it's not representing a human, but it's the way of rendering human figure which is different from what this person used to see in, I don't know, classical art or contemporary art. So it's a certain way of representing or showing or presenting the image. And I think that's what we encounter through these all periods, as George was asking for. So the way the human is presented is not to show any pride of the human, which we would encounter in ancient time or Renaissance time, to show the personality. It's not the historical thing. it's not the way of representing the beauty of execution of an image. When sometimes you see very decorative or very nice portraits hanging in some, I don't know, royal buildings. Yes, it's not parade portrait. It's an image made with a certain desire to present the figure on it as a living confessor, as a representative of the kingdom of God, which is not trying to prove anything by himself, but which is just presenting himself as the living approval of what is the kingdom of God. I know I sound a little strange, but I think that just the very way the image is painted is supposed or is transmitting certain values. And these values do not show anything terrestrial, or at least trying to show that terrestrial has a minor meaning compared to something which is beyond that. So the iconographer is not trying to present the personality, is trying to tell us, look, there is something behind the personality I'm showing you. And so like this, well, type of a sign or symbolic approach, which we would encounter to all the history of iconography. But this is very, okay, yeah, very, very approximate thing, but we are approaching it.
Can I show you one image?
Sure.
Yeah? All right. Let me
So
show
I
you
stopped
something.
sharing from my side,
Yeah,
yes?
Oh, yeah, okay.
Mhm.
Let me show you one image. Look at this. This is
Oh,
very
wonderful.
Byzantine.
Yes.
It's just a Piazza Armenina, a Roman villa. It's 4th century. It's totally Roman, has nothing to do with Christian art. And you see, it's it's so close to what we see very much.
Yeah.
Look at this. Look at this. Look at the perspective of it here. You see?
Yeah.
It's exactly our perspective. Comes out. Everything.
Also
Everything is in rhythm. Everything.
And the neutral background.
The neutral background
Yeah.
is the figures clear. The use of color exactly the same. So I'm not sure that was. I would say that was a stylistic trend in Roman world. So Christians, they just took this.
Yeah.
They elaborated that, definitely. It's not just the same, but that was an artistic language of the era.
Yes.
George, is that on the floor or is that on the wall?
It's on the floor. It's on the floor.
And
yeah,
there is. Sorry.
Go ahead,
basically, we have other symbols from the same period on walls, which is pretty close to that.
Yeah.
That was a stylistic trend.
Yeah.
The era.
Okay, but in this stylistic trend,
yeah,
the images which were used for Christians tried to eliminate any kind of things which were not necessary for church.
Yeah, but that was happening before. It was not a Christian invention. Look at another image. I'll show you another image.
Okay.
From the same monument. It's really impressive. Look at this. Look at this.
Wow.
Look the space. Look at this.
Very cool.
Yeah. You see that?
Yes, I do.
That's important. That's incredible.
Yeah.
Yes. And that's at the front, everything. Look at the figures, the way they are rendered. Everything is pretty close to what we call today iconographic artistic language. That was existed before. It's not a Christian invention.
Yes.
Christians, they took that, they transformed this, they elaborated that, but it's, I don't know, I'm not sure that we can give this artistic language such I would say eschatological content. I have difficulties.
But George, I have a question. When you say this was already happening, this is like late antiquity, right? It's like transitioning from more like refined naturalism to more of like of a stylized form.
Well, that was a trend in parallel with the classic, Hellenistic naturalism. That's the expressionism of late antiquity.
Yeah, yeah. What about the whole issue of like the eschatological like implications of style? Like, that's a big problem. I mean, that's a big part of the contemporary interpretation or how people discuss iconography. And but what you're pointing at is very important to actually see how the stylistic forms that we take for granted as somehow imbued with scatological significance were already being explored by the pagans, prior its adoption from Christians. Yes. And so along that line, the parallel question then arises as to the ecclesiological interpretation of the arrangement of space. I agree with your interpretation as to its ecclesiological import, but at the same time, it was a form that was being explored, a pictorial arrangement that was being explored by the pagan context. Sure. So, and I think that's a very important point, because it opens up, I mean, radically, the possibility of us being able to find pictorial components that have ecclesiological significance outside of the Byzantine, what we consider to be the Byzantine style. Exactly. And I think that's the wonderful challenge for any iconographer, especially nowadays, to be able to have the panoramic, broad perspective, to be able to look and analyze and say, I wonder if that's actually functionally useful within the ecclesial context, and experiment and see where, forms that are commonly thought of as not in any way or form possible, venues of, or possible forms to be included in the ecclesial context, that we have the capacity to explore.
I remember last time you were saying that we are all people of, actually modernism.
Right.
When or not, we are influenced by modernism. Yes. Right. In modern movement, movement of modernism, what was introduced was a different way of recomposing reality. So a new way of thinking on composition.
Yes.
Here, actually, we have a very specific way of composing things.
Yeah. Yeah.
This was taken by, let's say, Christian arts. You see that things in depth are up and the closest are down. So this is a way of composing things. And this is the composition of Byzantine, Russian style, iconographic style anyway.
Yeah.
So why not? If we can see modernism through this eye, looking for new ways of composing, of recomposing things without changing, the forms.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Of course.
Because
of course.
this, yeah.
And we have the parallel in the world of theology. It's very similar, you know, the
Yeah.
same way antique theologians used the antique philosophical language.
Philosophical terms, philosophy.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
Exactly.
And actually they were thinking, today we are thinking about theology through these terms, but we also, the contemporary theologians also do use contemporary language. So
Yeah.
this is precisely the same thing.
Yes.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
and I always use this as a parallel, you know, why if theology cannot, if theology has rights to think about ecclesiastical problems in language of contemporary thought, and it has actually, theology has to do this, otherwise no one would listen, you know. In theology it's must, you know. In theology it's something that you cannot avoid actually. So same thing should naturally happen in ecclesiastical art.
Yes.
It's the same thing. So
Yeah. That would be very normal, very natural, but it's
yeah,
not. It's
yeah,
not. Because today we have a tendency to dogmatize, let's say, this traditional iconographic way of composing, because it's just a way of composing. But giving this style a very theological content, actually we are elevate this language at the level of dogma, so we cannot change it.
Well,
That's
that relates, George, to what the whole issue of the eschatological implications of style,
Mhm.
and that's I mean that's the baggage of the 20th century icon revival,
Yeah.
and the theologies that were expressed in order to revive the icon, and that's the that's at least for me that has been in recent years a very redolent issue because um, the common assumption is that the icon is done the way it is done because it is supposed to imply some kind of eschatological meaning or doctrinal significance, you know, just in its form. Um, and so that's why in our last conversation, I think uh, we brought up the whole issue of the painter does specific things in order to try to communicate, you know, something through form. I mean, uh, not necessarily in any kind of like, you know, rational, you know, how do you call it, intentional way. I mean, there isn't,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, in the act of painting, you pick different colors than I pick. You know, I use the line in my own personal way, just the way I write my name is different than yours. And
Exactly.
so that also brings the icon to a different level. I mean, but you cannot attribute to every single one of those components any given dogmatic significance. So you see, that's like where the nuance is, and I don't think that nuance has been well communicated in the discussions of icon, and it has only been addressed in recent years. And you've done a lot of that, I think, when you bring up the dogmatization of style question. And I think that's an important, very hard thing to grapple with because of the misconceptions that you're addressing by bringing up that mosaic from late antiquity. That most people in church don't have that connection to that continuity of like the form or the historical context to be able to place the what we take for granted as a theologically correct way of doing things. But at the same time, I would ask, and this is a question open for everybody. I would ask, can we say that, for example, the photograph has implications as to it has epistemological implications, meaning like the way we perceive reality and how we come to knowledge of it. And when you take a photographic shot, it's as if you've captured one segment of temporal reality, okay? And so you've isolated it. And so a naturalistic or excessively photographic image tends to imply a reality bound to temporal sequence or mortality, if you want to. Okay, that could be one way of interpreting the photographic shot. Whereas the way that Philip was describing the icon in terms of those components that separate the image from the photographic, I think, although we cannot formulaically ascribe to those components specific dogmatic theological contents, nevertheless, we could say in general that these components, the stylistic components, do place the image in a theological frame of reference where you're not dealing with temporal sequences or temporal reality. You're dealing with an atemporal conception or an atemporal kind of like idea through image. Is that possible? Can we speak about it in those terms to sort of like find a nuance where it's neither a dogmatization of style, but also noticing that even if the image stylistically was derived from late antiquity and had nothing to do with theological meanings as we ascribe to it now, nevertheless, there is possibilities in image making that bring it from a mere representation of corruptible reality to an implication, at least, of a world, of a perspective that is ecclesial, an interpretation of the world or of man's reality and the cosmos that is ecclesial and in content. Can there be such a?
I would try to put something here. You know, in my opinion, this came to my mind even in previous discussion. In my opinion, actually, the very fact of using stylization in ecclesiastical art, you know, not the exact way of stylization, but the fact that we use stylization, no matter whether it was inherited from ancient art, never mind, you know, but the very fact, I think, has something to do with our ecclesiastical way of thinking, because the very fact that we use stylization, or as I like to call it, idealization, means that we paint, we give the intelligible dimension to the reality we depict. We try to give some kind of sense to what is depicted. It is not just a frame that is captured on the photography, because through these idealizations of forms, you put, let's say, the story, or not literally the story, but let's say some kind of higher meaning, or at least some kind of meaning to the image. You know, image, or we can say that image looks like it has been thought out. Yeah. This is the idea. So somehow, I don't like to use this term, but it can be used maybe here. we put some kind of let's say image to some kind of higher perspective, or let's say we try to represent world the way God looks to it, you know. Okay, we can't do it literally. It's not possible, of course. But we at least try.
I disagree. I disagree. We do not represent. We cannot represent kingdom of God. We cannot.
No,
we
no,
cannot
describe.
No. Well, so if we don't represent or describe what we do, we don't do that. We don't do that. That's why I was talking about ecclesiological dimension. What we do is to describe or represent the relationship we have. That's a different thing. We don't represent something eschatological. We present reality, what's happening now. But that has a eschatological dimension, but we don't describe this eschatological dimension. You know what I mean?
We don't describe. I was just telling that this is the attempt to, let's say, to bring some kind of tension to the image. It's not really a concept. It's a kind of more like the attempt to express something. It's okay.
Can I reword what you're saying, Todor? I think this. I don't know if this accords with what you're saying, but perhaps we could look at it this way. According to tradition, our patristic understanding, we know that the sensible, you know, and the noetic, they're different levels of perceiving things. They're not separate, and we do not say that the sensible is somehow bad, like the Neoplatonists would say. Of course not. I mean, we value the sensible and the body, but the fathers always say that if you're trapped by sensible experience, it's like having a veil. You're blinded to the ultimate realities of God. And so, and of course, think of the Neptic fathers. You know, you live a life of watchfulness, nepsis, in order for you to be cleansed from the passions and to grow inward, and you then begin to perceive according to a purified nous. And so perhaps, and I think George alludes to this in his book when he's talking about abstraction or the purifying of the image as a form of asceticism, or it parallels the ascetical life, but it's like the pictorial parallel of it, where we get rid of those things that are not functional within the ecclesial pictorial context. I think if we say, for example, Picasso said, "I paint not the way I see, but the way I think things." Okay, that has some relationship to what we're saying, because when we are when we are iconizing, we're not depicting according to what we see with our coarse eyes, a sensible perception. We iconize according to a higher understanding that is ecclesial, according to an ecclesial conscience. And so that's, I think, the way to basically better frame it. And so it prevents us from placing ourselves in God and thinking that we could see like him. And it places us in a more sober attitude about, you know, who has any one of us actually entered into the kingdom and come back to be able to depict it? No. And so that's, I think, a better way of framing it. So that way we're careful not to fall into over poetic ways of speaking about it, where people then get the wrong impression and then they begin to dogmatize style. I think that's perhaps.
I agree. You clarified it and told it very precisely. This is what I wanted to say.
Good.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
It's already 9:10. It's
Oh, wow.
I think. We
Time
were
flies.
struggling with
But-
we'll continue next week. Yeah.
But the
Good, good,
discussion goes so well. So I love the process.
God.
It's such
Yeah.
a great feeling of brainstorming iconography. I love it. I
Very good, very good.
enjoy every second.
Yeah.
Excellent.
So, well, if George, if you mean we should stop, we should still say some words about what is going to happen next. What could be in the next series, next episode?
I would say just continue. I would say that we can just continue looking at the icons and continue the conversation we had. It's
Yeah.
extremely interesting. So
Yeah.
let's.
Yeah, we have just started with the 11th century, so
I think
Yeah.
there are some,
Very
We-
good.
we have-
centuries to travel.
Right.
okay. Observing the icons.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Sure.
Very good.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Very good.
Okay.
And
Thank you.
see you next time. Now I'm stopping recording.